Welcome. My name is Kelly.
And my name is Josh.
And this is Fanimated, an animation fan podcast where we get a chance to geek out about our favorite animated media. And we are talking about Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Ooh, how fantastic.
It's fantastic.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. And Josh, I'm so glad that you're back on the show today. It has been a while.
It has been a while. It's really good to be back. It's good to be talking about something that I love so dearly. So thank you for inviting me back, Kelly. Yay!
Yay! For those who don't know, Fantastic Mr. Fox is the 2009 stop-motion animated feature directed by none other than Wes Anderson, who, you know, we're a big Wes Anderson fans over here.
Fan. Yes, I am deeply inspired by his movies. I'm one of those people that has watched most of his things. Not all of them, but most of them. And not everybody loves Wes Anderson. Some people have like weird thoughts about him because they're a little quirky, his movies, but I love them.
What was the first Wes Anderson movie you saw?
The very first one I saw was Moonrise Kingdom. And I remember exactly where I was and exactly who gave it to me and how I felt about it. I was in college. I was a sophomore, and I got really sick one week, and I think I was just overworking myself or something, but I was so sick, and I couldn't do anything, and I had 5 roommates at the time, and one of them, Benji, he loaned me Moonrise Kingdom because he thought I would like it. I was just sitting on the couch all the time, sick, and so he's like, you might as well watch this really great movie. I think you'll like it. And I had I'd heard about it, and I thought it would be interesting, and so I was really excited to watch it, and when I did, I forgot how sick I was. It was so good. I just remember I remember sitting up, and that was a big deal because I was so sick.
Yeah. You were like, Wes Anderson has cured my ailments.
Yes, I was healed in that moment by the glorious symmetry of Moonrise Kingdom.
Yes, patient Josh, I'm going to prescribe you a good dose of Wes Anderson films for this.
Thank you, doctor. Which one should I watch?
Oh, any of them will do the trick there.
Excellent, thank you. The movie doctor.
The movie doctor, exactly. That's great. Yeah, I think the Grand Budapest Hotel was my first one because I think I saw that pretty recently after it had come out. And of course, it's so charming, and I was just like immediately like, what else has this guy done? Like, I've been blind to these great films.
I feel like that's a common experience because that was mine too. Is I was kind of shocked, like, what? Like, what have I been missing? There's movies like this out there.
Yes, and it's like really like a piece of art that just like sucks you in. Because I was the same way, even though I wasn't sick. I was like, I am in this. Like, nothing can distract me from this thing. This story is just like pulling me in. This like. Not even the story, because I mean the plots of his stories are always like really interesting, quirky, but just like the experience of it is so unique, and it really just draws you in. So for you, Josh, how would you describe, to someone who's never seen a Wes Anderson film, how would you describe the Wes Anderson style?
Oh, well, funny you should ask. I happened to write a few of those things down as I was watching Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Excellent. You did your homework today.
Yes, let me just find my notes here. I would say that some of the most signifying elements of Wes Anderson's style are in his writing, because he often writes a lot of these. And so, like, the lines themselves and their delivery. The structures of the lines themselves are often, like, really long. And they're delivered really quickly and then followed up with really short spurts. So oftentimes a character like Mr. Fox will just like describe a whole bunch of things about what's happening, and then he'll say something about it. And like that pacing and that that kind of delivery is consistent through all of his movies, regardless of who the actors are. Another thing that leads into is he often uses the same set of actors, which as you start to watch more Wes Anderson movies, you'll be like, wait a minute, like that guy was in all of the other ones. Like Bill Murray is in like all of them. And I'm sure that's because Wes and Bill are probably buddies and they love working together. And I've worked in film enough on my own to understand that like you love working with people that you like and that you get along with, because
absolutely
the process is so tough and there's so much time you spend on it. So it makes sense. And so, you know, he's got people like Bill Murray and Jason Schwartzman, George Clooney, Owen Wilson, like all these people who just keep appearing in all of his movies. And so that's another like stylistic choice, that he's like, he plays with these actors, and he often puts them in positions that you wouldn't really expect them to be in, playing from like other movies that they've done. And so that's another thing. But if I was going to tell, I probably wouldn't say that right away to someone. Like if they asked me like, what's Wes Anderson's like, I wouldn't go on this tirade about their actors. What I'd probably say is Wes Anderson's style is very symmetrical and colorful and a little bit otherworldly. He plays with like a whimsical quality to life. And I'd say the best way to think about it is he treats serious things like they're funny and funny things like they're serious. Mm-hmm. And it's really great. Like, I love that quirky aspect. So oftentimes the word that is described with him is it's quirky, it's awkward, it's silly. The timing is a little bit off, and it makes it very funny. And that, with the symmetry, with the camera moves that he does, it's a lot of static shots where the camera isn't moving or it's on a tripod. He like never does any handheld camera work. It's always on sticks or on some sort of like racking machine or a gimbal, not even a gimbal, like a dolly or something like that. And it moves and it pulls and turns, and then like it's very specific. And so he's very, very like sharp with the way that the cameras move. And then I'd say the last thing is like he's very unlike, I would say, a lot of filmmakers, he specifically will choose like a color palette for each film, and then like everything is like within that color palette throughout the whole thing. And so it is like experiencing a specific piece of art rather than watching a movie that's like a slice of life, because he's not playing with like naturalism or anything. He's kind of like heightening things just a little bit with like you know, there are shots often where he'll do, which is, it's called a wide shot, where you see like a whole bunch of stuff in the room, right? And you often will use those to establish like, this is where the scene takes place. And so you're looking at the setting, and what he'll do is he'll take that wide shot and place it in the middle of the scene, and all you see is like the person's head is like the very center of the screen, but like on the bottom third. And so it's just like their head. And then there's like 2/3 of the screen above their head is just like the space around them. And you're like, what's happening? Like, I'm not really looking at the person, but like they're talking. Like, this scene should be about them. And then what he'll end up doing is showing you things that are happening in the background. And like, those are the things that are important in the scene, not like the guy who's talking. And it's just so brilliant. I think his treatment of detail, Kelly, I could go on. But this, I would say style is symmetry, it's detail, it's static, and it's playing with contrasts of serious and comedy.
That is excellent. Absolutely. And we can go on and on about it because that's the point of this podcast. Is
That's true.
Geek out about it. But they're all excellent examples, and I'll add too with just the direction style you're talking about. The camera is very static, and all of those things. The direction and the camera movements feels very theatrical. Mm-hmm. That's like my word for it, because it very much feels like there's always a fourth wall.
Yes. And
if you're not familiar with that kind of term, it's basically when you go to see a play, quite often, the actors are on stage and they have a set, and the room might have like a square room might have 3 walls, and then that 4th wall is your view into the scene. That's like the 4th wall that doesn't exist because you are looking through it from audience to the stage. And that's how it feels when I watch a Wes Anderson film, is that there is this 4th wall, even though it is a film. And with every film, there's a 4th wall, and sometimes they'll break it by, doing the Jim from The Office look into the camera.
Yeah.
Yep. But with Wes Anderson, I say that in a more real sense because they don't necessarily turn that camera around to see all 360 degrees of a setting. You're always looking at it from one specific angle the whole time.
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that, because I would probably have said that he breaks the 4th wall more often than films do.
He definitely does break the 4th wall a lot, even in this film, even in Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah, he does. Like, there's a moment, one of my favorite moments of breaking the 4th wall I noticed in this film for the first time, watching it again, is when the 2 younger foxes, Christopherson and Ash is like going to go set Christopherson free. He's like in his little cage, and Christopherson is sitting in there and he's blindfolded, and Ash says to Christopherson, "Can you give me a karate lesson?" And Christopherson is like looking at the ground when he gets asked that, and as soon as he says it, even though he's blindfolded, Christopherson looks directly at the camera and then looks back at Ash and says, like, "Sure." It's like he's breaking the 4th wall even though he's like blindfolded, and I
exactly.
love that.
It's because like Wes Anderson establishes the 4th wall so well, and then he will utilize it and break it, and it's very another term I'd say is like storybook-esque, because a lot of it, even with the like you said, there's like an unnatural quality. I don't remember the exact word you said, but otherworldly. That's what you said.
Oh yeah.
And that otherworldliness feels storybook-esque to me because everything just seems so perfectly placed in this little world. And it feels kind of like that fairy tale kind of thing, except it's, it is its own. It's not necessarily like, okay, Hansel and Gretel or whatever, but it is like kind of this a pop-up book coming out.
Oh yeah, it's a pop-up book. I love that. Yes, it's very whimsical, and like, granted, so this movie specifically is based on Roald Dahl's book, Fantastic Mr. Fox, and they definitely changed a few things for the sake of the movie and added some things, but it still has that quality, and so that's probably part of it, is it, it feels like a book. But I still would agree and say that all his movies have that kind of feeling of being like a book, being like it's coming from some, I love that, pop-up book. It's a moving pop-up book movie.
Yes, exactly. Like all these intricate little details, and it's like just popping out at you, and it's all, like you said, colorful and unique. It's all very unique, and it is a piece of art.
We'll be right back.
This podcast is the result of years of phenomenological trial and error. It is the product of attempt after attempt after attempt. It is also the product of years of introspective analysis, brought on by the occurrence of the strange and seemingly impossible. It began as an inquiry into the nature of reality. It is not a work of fiction. It is a work intended to be scrupulously followed for the desired results. Only a mind free of any doubt will accomplish the task of synthetically producing a glitch. Learn how to create a glitch in the Matrix.
So one of the things that is a challenge, I think, for Wes Anderson, who's a filmmaker. He moved into doing stop motion for this, right? And he had not done stop motion before, at least at this scale. And he's typically working with real elements, right? You're working with, like, you're in a coffee shop and you're shooting this scene, and so there are naturally stuff on the walls in the coffee shop you're shooting in, or you're outside and there's trees and there's an island, and so everything is based on your location. But in this particular movie, it's stop motion, so he had to create all of those things, which those in the animation world are totally used to doing. You have to create the entire world, right?
Everything is purposely designed.
Exactly, yes. And I think that
just wrap your head around this for 1 second. People who haven't thought about animation this much. Everything that exists, you have to create. It doesn't just exist.
So
Every single thing has to be thought about and made.
Just
It's wild.
It blows my mind every time I think about that, because it's so intense.
Wild.
And I was doing a little
thought.
bit of research on that for this one, and Nelson Lowry was the production designer for Fantastic Mr. Fox, and he said that they had to build 120 unique sets for this movie, which, you know, for the movie of this scale, that's a pretty normal number, but they had to build all of those from scratch, from nothing. And as a filmmaker myself, I think about that and my brain explodes. I'm just like,
oh no,
but how do you build the windows? Like, I don't want to build windows. You know, I just rely on the windows of the building that I'm working with. So it's
exactly.
like, that's nuts. And then they made like 535 different puppets.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The majority, I think, of those puppets were multiple versions, because they had like something like 40 different versions of Mr. Fox, different sizes and different like costumes and different scales, and they had to do that for a bunch of them. So it's just like, you have to make multiple versions of your actors. Like, hello, that's insane.
Yeah, stop motion animation is absolutely wild.
I just have so much respect for them.
So much detail and so much there's just so much management that has to be done, of like detail management. And it's absolutely mind-blowing and fantastic, and it's so exciting to see like movies like this, and everything from like Kubo and the Two Strings, and Leica, that's the studio that's doing that. It's good to see that there's still stop motion animation being made, because it usually isn't as popular, but it's just such a rare and fascinating art form, and it's like so exciting to see, because it's like it is in a league of its own for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I think Wes Anderson, of all filmmakers, makes sense for him to make this kind of transition, because if you look at all of his other movies, whether it's Moonrise Kingdom or Grand Budapest Hotel, or if it's The French Dispatch, the new one that they just released, or Royal Tenenbaums, or Life Aquatic, like in all of those, he is so particular about props and details in the background. And like, there's these scenes in Life Aquatic that stand in my mind where it's like somebody's office space at like a and the way, like, down to the type of typewriter and the coffee mugs that are there and the things that are on the walls. Like, there's always so much stuff on all the walls in like every scene that he does, and they always are just so like they tell you so much about the character. It's just ripe for like obsession because we can like look at it and be like, well, this detail says this. And like, for example, in Fantastic Mr. Fox, the newspaper that Mr. Fox is reading in some of the earlier scenes, if you look at it really closely, actually is text from Roald Dahl's book directly.
Oh, cool. Yes.
And like, that's such a cool element, and they actually had to build that, you know, that little piece, and it's not CGI. They like made it. I think there's only one CGI element in this movie. It's the flood of apple cider when they were like
oh yes
flying through the tubes. I think that's the only CGI thing that happens.
Yeah, because
nuts.
even like there's an explosion and there's smoke, and it's like all these little puff clouds of like cotton or something
Cotton.
that they've
I think it's
made.
wool. Yeah, wool and cotton.
Wool to make like the little cloud of smoke. Like it's so inventive and ingenious, and they're it's so good. So yeah.
Man.
Good job, stop motion animation team.
Yeah, way to go, because that's probably 2 years of your life.
Oh, absolutely. At least. With all of that, with how fantastic Wes Anderson is and the amazingness of stop motion animation, Josh, can you give us like a general synopsis of Fantastic Mr. Fox?
Sure, yeah. Okay, so Fantastic Mr. Fox is about a fox who is, he starts a family, and he gives up his life of being a thief and like stealing birds and hunting birds from farmers, and he gives up that life in order to raise his child with his wife. And throughout this movie, he meets other animals along the way that kind of remind him of the past that he lived of being a thief. And he doesn't want to live in the hole in the ground that he previously, or that he's been living in, because he feels poor now that he's just like a newspaper writer. And he buys a new home in a tree, which happens to be across the street from 3 of the most dangerous farmers in the land. And I think they are Boggies, Bunce, and Bean, I want to say. It's the 3. And they have big farms that are ripe for the stealing from. And so he kind of gets his thieving skill back after like 12 fox years of not being a thief, and decides to go steal again. And it ends up causing all these problems in the community. You know, the farmers get really upset, and so they destroy his home and the neighboring homes. And so it sparks this basically a war between the woodland creatures and these 3 obsessive farmers. And it's kind of about then how do they find their way through life again? How do they find a new life now that like he has his own personal desire to be this kind of wild animal that steals things and goes on adventures and is exciting like the wolf and like cool. Because of his selfish desire for that, he has caused all this pain to his family and to the people around him. And he has to work through that and make a new life for everybody, as well as kind of seek revenge. And his son Ash is a little bit different and a little bit odd, and it doesn't really get along with many people because he's a little bit small and awkward, and he really wants to be an athlete, and he's not very athletic.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happens is from the neighboring, I think it's like the Mr. Fox's brother sends his son.
No, it's from his wife's side of the family, because I remember, because like Christopherson does something super athletic, of course, and then the gym is like the coach is like, wow, you really are nephew of Mr. Fox. And then Ash is like, well, actually he's from my mother's side.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But anyway, a cousin of Ash, Christopherson.
Yes, Ash's cousin comes to town, and he's really athletic and becomes really popular, and Ash gets really upset about it. And so this little subplot is the 2 of them kind of duking it out and then becoming friends, and Ash realizing that being a little different is okay. And that like he can be proud of who he is because he can use the fact that he's small for good reason. You know, every aspect of his personality can be unique and good too. And yeah, so it's kind of this, it's got a little bit of elements of father-son stories in it. It's got a little bit of this this idea of pursuing adventure or family and community, and there's adventure, there's insanity in it, and there's wildness and civility and all these different things that happen throughout the journey of Mr. Fox. And he tries, as he saves his community through this trial that he has caused. And
yes.
Do we give away the ending, I suppose? Because
I mean, there's always, spoiler warning for any Fanimated episode. So yeah, go ahead and spoil.
All right. So if you haven't watched it already, stop this episode and go watch it and then come back. So, and then in the end, Mr. Fox is able to defeat the farmers, and he escapes from their grasp, and all the community lives in the sewer, and they find refuge there, and then they discover a passageway through the sewer that leads to a grocery store. And they pop up underneath it and are able to feed their families and the whole community of animals through funneling groceries from the store into the sewer to all the woodland creatures who now live in the sewer instead of in the woods.
Yes.
A beautiful, funny little ending.
Yes, exactly. So that's our crazy, wild little adventure. And I think a half of the moral, I guess, of the story is kind of Ash's discovery of, being small is also an advantage. Like, being different is good. And part of that too is, when they're in really dire straits, Mr. Fox looks at all of the other creatures, there's the badger and the rabbit and everyone, and is like, you're all different and have different unique aspects, according to you. And so together we can use what you have, like even the possum, the possum has something to give to the team,
You can see in the dark.
Yeah. You're good just to be there.
Yeah.
And he actually becomes quite useful, and he is useful the whole time. But, it's that kind of like, we're all different to the benefit of the whole community kind of thought. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very community driven. It's very family friendly, family forward, and promotes kind of that idea of like, find your place in the world and find your place within your family and within your community. And and I love that. I think it's good. It's got a good moral to me. I like that.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, like, how would you describe Mr. Fox's journey, like, for him? Because I feel like, him being kind of the main plot and Ash's story kind of being the B plot. Like, what is the moral for Mr. Fox? Because I'm still thinking about it, so we can verbally process this together, because I'm still trying to kind of pinpoint on what that is for him.
I would put it this way. Through the movie, Fox struggles to be what he wants to be, and so he pursues that, and it comes to a head, and he literally ends up staring at what he can be, which is the wolf, when he wants to be this wild creature, but he can never be, and in fact, he never really was a wild animal. It's like his desire to be a wild animal, but he never actually is. And so his acceptance of the civility of his life is the journey that he takes. It's like letting go of the desire to be something that he's not, and accepting what he is, which is a little different, just like his son Nash.
Oh my goodness. I love that. Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. It's him, wanting to achieve something that, like, he wants to view himself as, and he wants others to view him in a certain way. It's not only himself seeing in the mirror, this is what I want to be, but he says, like, I want people to see me as the fantastic Mr. Fox,
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah, you're right, realizing that he's not. And yeah, the wolf kind of is that comparison, and in this metaphor. So
yeah, and I think the normalcy of it all is what kind of strikes me, is that like in the same way, like in the play The Death of a Salesman, there's that pursuit of like being great. Like, I just want to be this great figure, you know, and it's really troublesome for that show. In this, Fox takes a totally different direction, but kind of accepts the fact that he's just a normal like guy, and that gets anthropomorphized and paralleled through the fact that he's kind of, quote, working at the grocery store by the end of it, you know. And so there's this image where he takes his family up into the grocery store, and even though he's not hunting birds, he's still providing for his family. And his wife says to him, "You really are a, quote unquote, fantastic fox." And I think that like is really a great way to do it, because like his wife kind of comes around because he really hurt her and did some mean things to her because he was lying to her, and he broke her trust, and he earns it back by proving that, you know, he can be trustworthy and can be providing for his family, which is in some respect like a normal, quote, thing. It's just kind of like living your life that doesn't seem very adventurous, but in fact is a very fantastic thing. If you can do that, that is very meaningful.
Yes.
And so his acceptance of that, I think, is truly special.
We'll be right back.
Hello, this is Tish Woods, one of your co-hosts of the Midstress Podcast. We are three college friends who are exploring the endless possibilities for women at midlife. We see this as the beginning of an amazing new chapter of our lives. We'll have inspiring interviews and bring our midster point of view on topics like health and wellness, fashion, adventure, relationships, and business. We've created a tribe of women that support and encourage each other to follow their passions and enjoy midlife. Come along and be part of the Midstress tribe. Subscribe to the Midstress Podcast wherever you're listening now.
Yes, like in turning outward instead of inward into his selfishness, into what he wants to be, and turning outward into what he can do for his family and his community. And because you mentioned Death of a Salesman, that kind of leads me to a point too with all of this, and into one of my favorite scenes is actually there's this evil French rat that they have to contend with. Yes. And Mr. Fox is fighting him, and the rat ends up dying. And it's this really unusual, peculiar scene. I mean, not that they all are, but especially for this film, like having this death, and like you said, something serious that's taken kind of lightheartedly, but also like there is this moment of like, yeah, what was your goal, rat? Like, what did you want? And he's like, I wanted the apple cider, because like one of the farmers has this like golden apple cider that's amazing. And that just made me think about Death of a Salesman, because as they kind of like set the rat into the sewer to be drifted away, Mr. Fox says, like, you know, he had these great big ambitions, and yet he's still just another like dead rat at the back alley of, you know.
Yeah, I wrote it down actually because I liked that moment a lot. He says, Ash says, I think he found redemption. And Fox says, redemption, sure. But in the end, he's just another dead rat in the dumpster behind a Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, that's it.
Woo! It cuts deep.
It is.
Deep
it's like,
right,
I was like, wow, this is really existential right now. for this animated movie. But it you know, all of our talk with Mr. Fox's journey, it kind of relates to that idea of like, you know, we're all just people, and you know, you might take that in like a bad way, but it's also like it's the acceptance factor, I guess, like Mr. Fox has to do, that we're not all superheroes. We are people.
Yeah.
And it's about the other people that you're with.
Yeah, and I think there are lots and lots of references in the movie that reinforce that. For example, in that scene with the rat, he's literally doing a choreography from West Side Story.
Yeah.
And there are elements of that, like snapping that he does in that moment. There are elements in West Side Story that come out through that, because in West Side Story, it may be a lot about love and like this clash between people groups, but it's also like a lot of those characters really want to have greatness, especially the guys who are doing that scene where they're fighting each other and they're snapping. Like that specifically, I think, comes out. And so all that to say, there are so many different little references in this movie that kind of tie back to that, whether it's also the white cape that Ash wears.
Yeah.
He puts on this cape and he tucks his pants into his socks and he's really silly looking, and he puts on a tube sock over his face to be a mask, and he like wants to be a superhero. He wants to be great, and he keeps pursuing this thing, and he calls it, I want to be an athlete. And that's like his big goal. And the acceptance of the fact that sometimes you want things that you aren't, and that doesn't mean you can't want them or you can't like try to have aspects of those, but when you accept that you are a certain way, then it gives you the freedom you need to benefit from the goals and dreams that you have.
Absolutely. And to side note into like our Christian perspective of that is to say we are created with certain gifts and abilities, and we are all created in certain ways and differently in order to function as a whole. Like our abilities are to help other people and to fit into a larger narrative, rather than to fulfill our own individual desires.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It is beautiful. It's just a way of accepting that you, like, I don't know, I feel like in American culture you're so pressed to be like great, and there's this big expectation that you must have greatness and achievement and success, and I think that I personally have really struggled with letting go of that and accepting that like I can have greatness in my marriage, and I can have greatness in my friendships, and like those are really special things too, that I don't have to like be a really famous or a really rich person in order to like make a difference in the lives of the people around me. I can simply live my life to the fullest with them and go through all the ups and downs of life, and that's really great too. And accepting that and working through that with the people around me is still tough, and is still a challenge that is worthy of undertaking.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better.
Oh gee.
Oh shucks. Well, Josh, what are some of your other favorite scenes in this movie?
Okay, so some of my favorite things in this movie are some of the like really small detailed things, like the music, for example, is so used to tell the story, because like there's this part where for some reason, who knows why, the humans and the animals are having a party at the same time. The animals are having it because they just stole a bunch of food from the humans, but the humans just happen to be having this party, and there's this guy named Petey who is playing the banjo and like playing this wild song. He's just kind of making up these lyrics, and it's so like glorious because they're just like having a good time. It's kind of bluegrass feeling, and it like pairs with the humans dancing around the fire, just having a good night, and then the animals like stealing all their food in the background. And then all of a sudden it gets broken because the big bad farmer Beans, like, he comes up behind him and says, "Petey, what are you doing?" And Petey's like, "Oh, I don't know, I just kind of making up the lyrics as I go." "No, that's a bad song. You wrote a bad song, Petey." And he flicks his cigarette at him and leaves. And that's the end of the scene. It's so funny.
It's not what you expect, for sure. And it's another instance of Beans being the quote-unquote meanest of the three farmers.
Oh, yes. He is the meanest.
He's the meanest.
He's also played by Dumbledore, by the way, so that's a nice contrast for that actor.
Yeah, oh my gosh, seriously. And those are two wildly different characters.
Yeah. What about you, Kelly? What's one of your favorite scenes?
I really like... Oh, I forget the name of the sport, but it's when I love the scene when they're at school.
Whack-bat or...
Whack-bat.
Yeah, I think it's whack-bat.
Whack-bat. And they're playing whack-bat at school. And of course, this is Ash's, like, he wants to be good at this. And of course his father was like, the champion of champions at this game. Of course. Typical father-son story dynamic. But what I love about it is Christopherson is new to this area, and so he's like, "Oh, we don't play whack-bat when we're on the other side of the river. Like, how do you play whack-bat?" And the coach, like, you see like the angle from above of the field, and the coach, it's just like you said with the dialogue, right? It's like all these really crazy things, and then it's punctuated by a shorter line. And so he gives this whole long spiel on how you play whack-bat, and it's done really fast, and you're just like, what the frick is happening with this game? Like, it makes no sense. And then
all these symbols appearing on the screen.
Yeah, and you see, like in a sports game, and like all the little arrows and this person moves here and blah, blah, blah.
Like
and
football plays.
And then you cut to Christopherson and the coach, and Christopherson just like, "Okay, got it." And it's just like, what? You got that? Because I sure didn't. And then they do a round. And I had to go back and watch it again because I was just like, you watch the kids actually do this. And there's like one kid like pirouetting like in the field. Like, just like these kids are doing like random stuff. And I'm like, how fun was it for these animators to be like, okay, what are these people doing during this? Like, because it makes absolutely no sense. And then you count up some weird number and divide it by 9. Like, that's...
Yep. And then you have to say hot box.
Hot box. Oh my goodness. Like, literally one of the instructions is like, oh, and these players just run back and forth. Like, why?
Yep. They go from here to there.
And so I love that. I love that absurdity. And like you said, something funny and making it serious. Like, it's all done very seriously, and that's what makes it funny.
Yep. And they do like when they show all the kids playing, it's like a one really long shot, right, where you can see the entire field kind of in profile, and you watch the whole thing happen all at once. And Christopherson like owns it, like gets a whatever you would be the equivalent of a home run.
Yes.
He gets a hot box or whatever.
Yeah.
Good.
It's so funny. Yeah.
One of the other really funny parts of this movie to me is when they decide to move. So at the beginning, Mr. Fox is like tired of feeling like he's poor, so he's like, I don't want to live in a hole anymore. And so he finds a tree to live in. And so he hires this squirrel moving company. So there's like 10 squirrels that come in and move all their stuff. And this one lead squirrel is like shouting out orders the whole time. And he like doesn't miss a beat as he's like saying all these different things. Like, you need to bring that over there. Oh, and you need to do this. And oh, be careful of that. And it's really nice. And it's like these tracking shots, which tracking shots are the ones where like a camera is on like a 4-wheeled dolly, and like somebody either pushes it or moves it, or it's mechanical, like a little car or golf cart or something like that. And it goes sideways, right, from left to right. Mm-hmm. Now you're doing that, and you're doing it with your real camera, but a stop motion. And so you're going from left to right, and it's like you have to move that dolly an inch, and then make your action happen, and then keep doing it. And like I just can't imagine doing those kind of intensive tracking shots in stop motion, because they're already hard enough to do in normal film.
Right.
And then what he did is they did like a cross section of the tree where you can see like as if you removed the fourth wall from the tree, right? So you can see the upper level and the lower level at the same time.
They cut into the cake and you could see the inside.
Yes, like this cross section of that tree, right? And you're seeing that as well, which is just so brilliant and so cool looking. It's one of my favorite little moments, is just like looking at that. I also really love how in the scene where they go to the apple cider farm for the first time and they meet the rat, that is so beautifully lit, because all of those apple cider jars are basically the source of light for the entire room. There's no other lighting. So it's just like light is emanating off these jars, which looks like it's catching from some sort of upper light. And it's so pretty. But what I watched a little video about that scene because I was so interested by it. Apparently, they had to move all of those. Like, they look like they're static, right? They're just in these like racks. They're just kind of standing there, so you wouldn't think they'd have to move them, but every time they move the camera, they'd have to move the cider jars because the light had to refract off them in such a way that it didn't darken anywhere else. So every time they would position for a new shot, or even just move the camera up like inches or whatever, they would have to move all of the different jars.
Oh my goodness, that's insane.
It's just so crazy to me. But
again, stop motion animation is a science.
It really is. Yeah.
It's so detailed. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I just love that little factoid.
I love that too. Wow. Any other scenes that you want to highlight?
Oh yeah. So there's a few things that I love about Wes Anderson in general, and that's his ability to create beauty so easily out of especially mundane things. And there's a lot of really beautiful shots that I just love. And so like things to point out, like when the wolf gets revealed for the first time, they've kind of been talking about the wolf throughout the whole thing as a symbol of like things that people are scared of. And they go and they're motorcycling along, and they suddenly stop and they see the wolf, and he tries to talk to him in English and it's not working. And then he tries to introduce himself like Canis Vulpus, or no, Canis Lupus, Vulpus Vulpus, which is their Latin names.
Yeah.
And then he's like, that doesn't work. So I think he speaks Spanish or French to him.
French, yeah.
And then he's like, well, I guess he doesn't speak that. So then he just puts his fist up in the air, and then the wolf is like in the distance, and it's like perfectly silhouetted on this like snowy mountainous terrain that's rugged, and there's trees on either side of him, and he's like standing on this snowy hill that like goes down towards the foxes that turns into this autumn thing. It's like the only snowy part of the entire movie. And then the wolf, who looks very menacing like a real wolf, puts his fist in the air. It's like, what? And it's so beautiful, and I love that. I love that. And then like some of the other imagery that's similar and surprising is like when the fox and Mrs. Fox are like meeting in the sewer, and everything bad has happened, and there's this waterfall behind them, and it's just so stunning. It's a beautiful, it's like waterfall made out of, I think, cellophane, and it just looks so good. And their clever ability to like use eyes to like change out people's eyeballs to make them look like they're either confused or dead or you know, angry, you know, like to swap out the entire eyeball so it looks different. And you know, he just does all those things. Oh, and then one of my other favorite ones, which the first time I saw it, I was so confused and I didn't get it. And then every other time I've watched it, I've loved it. It's when in the very first scene, you're meeting Mr. Fox and Mrs. Fox, and you're discovering that they're like in love, and they're going to steal this bird, and they do this really long tracking shot that goes from left to right. It's kind of like a Mario game, right? Where you, like they're like going in and out of things, up and down, and it's so flat and so cool. And they do that whole scene, but right before that, you're discovering that Mr. and Mrs. Fox like really love each other, and they're really happy. And he just says, it just seems like you're glowing. And then they show her and she's like a plastic version of herself, and she's literally glowing. Like light is coming off of her because they swapped her out for a plastic version.
Yes, it's so funny.
So funny. And they end up repeating it again at the end when at the end of the movie she announces that she's pregnant, and they're both glowing. So then they both get replaced with these plastic doll versions. And it's just, I thought it was so funny because it just changes the whole element, but of like what's happening, and it kind of highlights the fact that you're watching a movie. It's another one of those kind of fourth wall break things because it's so clear that they've clearly swapped out a different
They
figure.
Completely break your suspension of disbelief, and they remind you that they're just like, oh, we're just playing with you. We're just messing with you.
Which is so funny, and I love when you can do that so successfully that time and time again, it's still funny.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Those are great. Those are great.
Another thing that I really like is their attention to detail with the sound design, because there's this little quality where Mr. Fox does this whistle thing. I can't whistle, but it's like a... And it like kind of comes back. It's like his trademark, right? Yeah. And he keeps doing that. And there's these constant little bits that will come up, ranging from the hand symbol that the badger and the fox do every time they get confused. I like put up this little hand symbol, to Ash also making like little sounds every time he like wants to do something, just like he wants to be like his dad, you know? And I think it's so clever to use your sound design both as like what's happening in the space and like their interaction between things, but also to have your actors be a part of the sound design. Like that's just really neat.
Yes, that reminds me of what movie were we talking about? Jamie and I were talking about the Lego Batman movie.
Oh, okay.
And that is one where they take actual, because it's toys, and that's the Lego movie whole franchise. The whole thing is like embracing that it's toys, and your imagination and all that. And so we were pointing out that like they use like human voices for some of the sound effects. Like it'll be like pew 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 for the gun sounds, or like a siren will go and it'll be like meow, meow, or like, you know. So it's all. And I just love that sort of thing. It's so fun. It's just different, and
it really is. Yeah,
engaging.
It's fun, and it makes it like just, I don't know, feel like, again, a storybook. What other moments did you really like?
Not necessarily moments, but just a specific thing that I like about Wes Anderson as well is like the constant foreshadowing. And you mentioned it kind of with the wolf, like. Throughout the entire film, there are people who just randomly comment about wolves for no reason. And so it's like this very, like, oh yeah, where's the wolf? Like, there's a wolf coming. Because different people will be like, I'm scared of wolves. Or there's mentioned wolves. And the other one, though, that's really prevalent in this film is lightning. Because, ultimately... The scene where the rat dies, there's like, it's this high voltage electricity that kills him. So throughout the movie, like even at the beginning, there's like an electric fence, or the Mrs. Fox is painting lightning bolts all the time.
She keeps painting thunderstorms landscapes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, okay, the storm is always coming. And so I really like those like little details of things, and it's very like obvious, but it's also kind of just like it's kind of like a fun like, okay, well, where is this? Well, you know, what's this going to be? Because this is clearly something that's coming, and even though it's an obvious foreshadow, like it's done in a way that doesn't feel like it's not like mocking our intelligence as an audience, you know. It's kind of, it's, if anything, like looking at the Christmas presents under the tree, like you're excited about like, okay, what's that mean, you know? And it's just kind of fun. It's like a fun little like reveal when things happen.
We'll be right back.
Humans on the Road podcast. This is Latavia here. This podcast was created to educate and inspire people about the ably different community who are on the move. So come roll with us. We educate and have a little fun too. Is that I have something that is called a helix vulgus, which is like a bunion that people with CP get on their feet.
Putting me on the spot.
Yes, I'm quizzing you now. What is my favorite movie? I'm putting this friendship to the test.
Yeah, I love that. And there's so many things to pay attention to that I think that's one of the ways that they can get away with not treating their audience like they're dumb is like there's a lot of details that they put in, so it depends on what you're looking at. Like some of these things might come back, some of them will not, you know, like the there's an accountant in the lawyer's office who's like I think she's a badger, and she's like counting things in that law office, and then later she ends up when they like become refugees in the mine, she's like counting food as well, and she never says anything. She's not like a character in anything except in the background. She's always like counting things, and like that never comes back or anything, but it's still something that you can pay attention to because it's happening, and they are always putting stuff in the background for you to pay attention to, so it kind of throws you off, you know, and I love that.
Yes, like Wes Anderson really rewards audience members who pay attention.
Yeah, and I think it's a challenge for new viewers to his films to get used to that, because most of the time we're shown what to watch in a film. You know, like you just show what's important and highlight the focus point. But like there's a scene in this one where he's what's the other one? It's when they're robbing the second farmer, and the farmer himself is just like sitting there in the security room, like eating, and in the background all these security cameras, and the entire story is happening on those security cameras of them stealing stuff, but the focus is on the guy eating his food. Like he's like the primary element in the screen, but that's what you look at. And I just think that is a really clever way to help your audience like learn a new way to watch a movie and to like pay attention to different things, you know. And that's one of the reasons why I think some people really don't like him, is because it's very different from other movies, is that like people don't do that kind of thing, and they just show you what's important. Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't, like, Wes Anderson films don't force feed you, you know, what's happening, like and it's always done in a way that you're not expecting. And it's just like, it's not what a lot of people are used to, so it can be jarring, and I understand that, you know, and it might not be as fun of an experience for everyone. But I really, really enjoy it, and I enjoy that it's provided to us in a different way. We're fed the story in a different way, you know. You're consuming it in a more active way, because it just requires your attention, and I think that's why it feels so theatrical, like you said earlier. That, like, it feels like you're a participant in the story, that you have to pay attention in order to get it, you know? Exactly. It's not the kind of movie that you put on in the background like a Hallmark Christmas movie, you know? Yeah, and that's an excellent point. Like, even, you know, when I was rewatching this movie to talk about, I at one point was, doing some laundry and not looking at the screen, and then I quickly realized that this is not a movie I can do that to, because so much is happening. So much of the story is being told visually and not auditorily. And I've said this before on the podcast, but I absolutely have so much respect for storytellers who can say a lot without dialogue. Yeah. And obviously the dialogue of this film is fantastic and funny and inventive. But there is so much that you miss if you're not paying attention to what's happening on screen. And that's what makes, a visual medium like film and animation different than, reading a book or listening to something. Like, it's the visual aspect. Like, you're getting a story through
what you see.
Yeah, and he uses different tactics or techniques, you know, to help you do that. Like we talked about that wide shot thing, right, with the space around everybody. But they also do that that full face shot where like someone's entire face is the frame of the camera, and they're looking right into the lens. Yes. And then they cut to what they're looking at, which happens to be somebody else's face, you know, and you're having this conversation with, it feels like you're like inches away from someone having this conversation, and it throws you into this different element of the story that you're like, oh, I'm now like in this person's like intimate moment.
Yes. You just like, you just opened the doors in my mind here a second, because... Because like normally when you're watching a TV show, right, like, or a movie or whatever, like what you're seeing is a third person perspective of like you're watching person A's shoulder in the side of the camera frame, and then person B's face like past the shoulder of this person, right? You're like, that's a pretty common shot, right? Like you're seeing what's happening and you're seeing the other person's expressions and, you know, features. But as you're saying, instead of that, you're almost seeing person B from person A's perspective. Yeah. And you're seeing their perspective. So you're seeing things from the character's point of view, which is strange because you think about, you know, all the things we just said about Wes Anderson, like at the beginning of this podcast, that like it's theatrical, right? It's like you're looking at everything happening at once. And then I'm just recognizing, oh my goodness, he also does this weird first person thing. And so like he's mix matching all of these different forms of perspective. And that's just wild. But it's done well enough that it doesn't feel, it's almost as if everything is so off that it fits, that it it is in sync.
It's like he's built a world, you know, like that's, as a creative person, as a writer, you have to learn how to build a world and like make it feel real and cohesive, and that's the way that he chooses to do it in this style, you know. And I look at other filmmakers like Edgar Wright, or even like older ones like Ingmar Bergman. I would guess that Wes is probably influenced by those two as well. And like Edgar Wright and Wes Anderson are both still making movies today. But Ingmar Bergman made a film many years ago called, it was Midsummer Night's Dream, actually. I think it was, he made a filmed version of that Shakespeare play. And he did it with like curtains on the film itself. It kind of looked like you were watching a proscenium production. Yeah. But it was all filmed. And so they were playing with this idea. It was very experimental. And it felt like, you know, this is, am I looking in through a window? Or am I watching a play? Or am I watching these characters really experience something? Like it kind of made you question what your experience was as an audience member. And I kind of feel like Wes Anderson maybe does that too, is like, wants you to kind of wonder about these stories as like, are you a member, or are you, you know, really participating in this otherworldly thing? And at the same time, I mentioned Edgar Wright, and he's a British filmmaker who has a similar style, lots of symmetrical shots, lots of really colorful things, lots of quirky behaviors and whatnot. But his is a lot more like clippy and action oriented, and lots of really fast motion things that happen. But I think what they both do is they create a mood, they create an atmosphere through their films that like are not, they're not real. And like no one sees the world, you know, quite like that. You don't have sound effects every time you pan the camera. Like in these Edgar Wright films, there's this whoosh sound that happens when like you pan quickly, whoosh, and now you're looking over there. Like that doesn't happen in life, but he does that a lot in his movies. And or there's like fast, quick cutaways to other things, you know. To do those sort of things is to kind of highlight the fact that you are indeed watching a movie, and we are gonna take advantage of that fact and show you other aspects of these worlds to deepen and enrich the quality of the experience in the world that you're participating in, because it's not ours, it's something different. And especially because this is, animated, and there are Fantastic Mr. Fox is animated, and they are foxes and animals,
Yes.
It helps build that even more. But I was watching an interview with him, and he said that they wanted it at first to feel like it was autumn, like it's fall. And so he talked about how that's kind of the production design, what they wanted it to feel like it was fall, but it takes place over several weeks, and there's also like a winter element that happens, and then there's so you're not really sure if it really could all take place in fall. However, what he did say is that what they decided to do to make it feel like that is just take the green and the blue out of everything.
Yes.
And so there's hardly any green or blue at all anywhere.
Yeah.
And it makes it feel, in a strange way, real. It makes it feel like so much more cohesive, because the entire thing is like that. And it feels familiar in as if the entire movie took place at golden hour in September.
Yes.
In Iowa, where there's lots of farms around. So it's so interesting that those qualities, those tactics are ways that you can build a world and make people feel like they are a part of something that's completely unreal, and yet has something so universal that, people like you and me can talk about it 16 years after it's been made. Or whatever it is, 2009, I guess 12 years.
12 years.
So yeah, I just love the tactics that he used, and I think that he probably pulled from other filmmakers, because I could kind of see some of that influence.
Yeah, that's super fascinating and super cool to be because everyone is building off of each other over time of what, other people have done. And Wes Anderson definitely has had influences over his creative work, just like every creative does. And being able to put those pieces together is really cool. And to see how a filmmaker treats their audience, and what ultimately, with filmmaking especially, because you have so much control over what the audience actually sees, does it feel like a fantastical world or not? And that's really, it's fascinating. I love to just dissect all of those choices that a director makes, because every choice says so much.
Yeah, they really do. And it's so much collaboration. And, there's a moment where I think they're in the town, and they're Fox and Kylie are boarding a motorcycle to try to make their getaway. Mm-hmm. And they pop out of the sewer, and they run down the street, and they go behind them. You see the motorcycle that they're about to get on, and they go behind it, and then you hear the motorcycle start, and you're like, oh, cool, there they go. But then a tiny motorcycle appears from behind and drives by, and the one that you were looking at is still there.
It's the subversion of expectations done in such a clever way.
Yeah.
And it just gets me every time.
Me too. And that's an old bit, people have been doing that kind of bit for years. That's in a Buster Keaton movie. It's in a Harold Lloyd movie too, from the silent film era. And those to use that quality takes a lot of collaboration to for people to use all your influences and to put it all together and to make that happen, to build the pieces that go into it. It's just so impressive and so fun. And just, to me, it's the epitome of the collaborative creative process, to be able to have a director and have all these different directors of other departments coming together to make even just one of those moments happen.
Absolutely.
It's just such a miracle to even see it happen.
Any great big collaboration like a film is always a miracle. Every film, every show we talk about it, I'm always just in awe of the production management that needs to happen, and just how all the pieces come together. It truly is magical. Film is a magical process, and with lots and lots of people doing their each individual part, just like the animals in Fantastic Mr. Fox, all doing their part.
Wow.
And all having their special skills to contribute.
It's a pretty good analogy you just drew up there, Kelly.
Thank you. That just came out right off the top of my brain.
A tip of the hat to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh man. Well, certainly if you haven't already, and if you've listened this far, please go and watch Fantastic Mr. Fox. It is just a very fun show. I'd say I don't know of any kids who've watched it actually, but I would assume that there's gotta, it's family friendly enough. Aside from the rat dying.
And the fact that they don't swear, they just say cuss.
That is so great to me.
It's amazing.
Like every time there's foul language, it's they just replace whatever that part of the word with cuss.
Are you cussing me?
Yeah, are you cussing me?
You cussing me?
It's so good. Oh man, there's so many. There's also, just like side note, just like so many quotable lines in this movie. Like the labs partner scene, like just really quick because I love that scene. Ash's lab partner, I forget her name. What's the?
I think it's like girl? Angela or Angie or something like that.
Well, anyway, this gal, his lab partner, is of course just like enamored with Christopherson over there, and they're talking and everything, and Ash gets upset like, hey, you're my lab partner, and she's like, I am, and he's like, no you're not, you're what does he say,
you're disloyal
and it's so serious, like he's so serious about it.
He's so serious. And you're just like,
you're disloyal.
You just said that. I can't believe you just said that.
It gets me every time.
Yeah. It's as if they're like a serious partnership that has to like, this can't be too, like you are my lab partner only.
Yes. It's just like, it's just science class. You're fine.
I love that. Oh, and there's another one. I've used this phrase before. So Meryl Streep plays Mrs. Fox, which is just so great.
Fantastic.
And there's this one scene where the Fox and Kylie come home after a night of sneaking away and stealing things, and they're in their masks, and she barges in, like she's been waiting for them to come home, and she's in the dark, and she steps in and says, if what I think is happening, it better not be. Which is such a good line.
Because it's like you think there's going to be some sort of threat, but it's like, it just better not be.
It just better not be.
And it like zooms in on her face. Oh,
yep.
So good. It's just, there's so many quotable pieces to this. And like even just the little details of like Christopherson is like, aside from being like almost flawlessly perfect and everything, is also like goes off and meditates.
Oh yeah,
quite frequently in the middle of everything. Like, so good.
I think he says, I'm going to go meditate for a half hour, and then like runs away. And then the mom says to Ash, you have 29 minutes to figure out a way to apologize to him.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Oh man. Truly, the writing is genius. Yes.
So stunning. I would love to be in a writer's room with that.
Oh, because, be the fly on the wall and hear what's going on.
Yeah. I heard that Wes Anderson wrote most of the script himself, along with Noah Baumbach, I think, but they did it in the same study that Roald Dahl wrote the actual book. Like, he went to the house of Roald Dahl's widow and, like, interviewed her, talked to her, asked if he could like work in like and learn about the book, and so he was able to see original like sketches and the rough drafts and stuff, and she let him work in the same room, which was like a shack detached from the house in the garden, like a little office, and he worked in that space and was able to write most of the script there, using the inspiration from the original inspiration, which to me is so cool. And then he took pictures of every item in that room. Everything from the desk to the typewriter to the pencils to the coffee cups to the windows, everything. And he had them turned into miniatures and put them into the fox's home.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
So
wow.
cool. So if you think it's like the sofa chair that he's sitting in the beginning, it's the same sofa chair that like Roald Dahl would sit in,
wow.
just a miniature version, which is just...
That's incredible. Like,
so neat.
I did read that Wes Anderson is a huge fan of Roald Dahl's, and that's kind of why he took on the project. And like to put so much, you know, time and energy into honoring, you know, that original story. And obviously, this is not quite the original story because they've added a lot to the plot.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
And changed it up, of course, for film and everything. But like to still be honoring the original author and the original story in that way is truly, truly amazing.
Yeah, I love that. You know, I hope that I can respect my inspiration, my heroes in that way. If I ever, you know, meet them.
Yeah.
But if I'd still hope to treat the source material with such deep respect as that is just
Absolutely.
Really neat.
Especially for an animated film to have that much respect for the source material, because quite often, you know, it's a children's book that I mean, for a lot of very good reasons, you know, have to change to make it work for film. And obviously there are great examples of that, How to Train Your Dragon being one of them, where they have you know, taken the original basis and completely made their own unique thing, which I love as well. But, you know, and even Fantastic Mr. Fox, this is something different, but still keeping that connection is really great. Really, really fun to hear about.
Yeah, and I always wonder where those bits come from and like how they develop it and like what that process is like, because it's super different for every artist, you know. And like I just, like I was saying earlier, I would want to be in a writer's room, like just a fly in the wall listening to like where do those ideas come from. And you know, I heard that as well, the actors for the film did a lot of the audio recording outside, and they would just be like in the woods or, you know, in a park, and they would have all their professional audio gear there, and George Clooney would be there in his t-shirt and would say his lines and like move around a bunch, and like that's how they would capture audio, which is like so strange. That's not what you do for an animated movie or stop motion. You go in a studio and you capture really clean audio, and you usually have just one person there to get the one lines, but they would actually record entire scenes like that outside, which is like an independent filmmaking sort of thing to do.
Yeah, like if you don't hear that like from such a professional, you know, film production, like wow.
Yeah, and I think they did that because they knew that they wanted it to feel raw and real and connected to these actors, because they're very specific in the way they work, and I'm sure they had to like basically create an audio version of the film first because it's stop motion, so they needed to like, line everything up. So I'm sure they like did all that recording and made basically this audio track that was the whole film, and then they went in and animated everything. But man, like to have that kind of time and I would love that.
That's amazing. And yeah, even with like writing, where he was writing and doing audio outside, like really just making everything feel really authentic. Incredible. Again, this has just been the Wes Anderson Geek Out session.
Wes Anderson Hour with Josh and Kelly. Welcome to our Hot Box.
Hot Box. Yes. Oh man. So such a good film. We'll have to watch Isle of Dogs.
Yeah. If you're interested in Wes Anderson and in other animation, he did Isle of Dogs just a couple of years ago, which is another stop motion one that they did very well and used I think he did it with the same production company in London, I think, and upgraded their style and a lot, because they went from dealing with animal fur for all these animals, and it's clearly like a little bit rough because fur and stop motion is really hard, and then they did it for a bunch of dogs. It's really impressive. Have you seen it, Kelly?
I have not. It's one that I have not seen. So
you should check it out. It's really good.
I should definitely check it out for sure. For sure. It's been on my list for a while, so better get around to that.
Yeah, well, you have a list a mile long, I'm sure. So if you get it, great.
Yeah. As always, I do, definitely. So don't expect anything too great from me, everybody. I'll do my best. All right, thank you guys so much for listening. To hear over a dozen bonus episodes and vote for upcoming episode topics, you can go to patreon.com/Fanimated and become a member of the Fanimated crew. Thank you to everyone who supports the podcast and makes this podcast possible. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Fanimated Podcast to stay up to date with all things animated. And don't forget to leave a rating and review telling us what you'd like us to watch next. I love reading those rating and reviews. We usually share them on our What You're Watching episodes, so thank you to everyone who does that. You can even email me at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. All of those emails just mean a lot to me, and I love you all. The music is written by Jamie Krause, and the art is done by myself, and you can find my personal drawing art Instagram at Candor Draw. Josh, where can they find you, and what upcoming projects would you like to promote?
Ooh, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram and my website at joshypalms.com or just at joshypalms. And I am currently working on a 8-episode fantasy web series called Hidden Falls, which is very exciting.
Yes.
We have released the first episode already. It is available at hiddenfallsfilm.com. You can also find us on social media at Hidden Falls Film. And we are currently in production. We finished the first phase. We're about 3 episodes in now of filming, and we're starting up again in January, and we'll be done filming by that's January 2022. We'll be done in hopefully June 2022. So it's a long road ahead, but we'll be posting all about that process. So if you're interested in fantasy, it's super cool, and I'm really excited about it. It's very near and dear to my heart, and a story that I find to be very important to say now. So that's where you can find me.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I am personally really excited for more of Hidden Falls. I'm just on the edge of my seat with the first episode, and it was so enchanting and really engaging. I'm already in love with these characters, and I can't wait to see what happens for them and their story. So definitely check it out, everybody. With that, we will talk at you soon with more animation nerddom. And as we always say, stay tuned.
And stay animated. I feel like there's got to be a catchphrase from Fantastic Mr. Fox that they say.
I should. I feel like so much of the dialogue is quotable, and so many scenes are so memeable.
Why does she write these with letters cut out of magazines? I don't know, but you did the same thing.
Oh, that is so good. I want to see a little sunshine, but you're nocturnal, Phil. Your eyes barely open on a good day.
Am I getting better, Coach? Well, you're sure as cuss not getting any worse.
Oh, here's a classic that's like the epitome of the show, of the movie. We're all different, indicates Mr. Fox. Especially him. But there's something kind of fantastic about that, isn't there? We're all different.
Yeah. Oh,
but there's something kind of fantastic about that. We're all fantastic.